Am I live? I'm live. I have so much work to do right now. And yet I am paralyzed by indecision and general ish that I think I'm going to use some more time sitting with psychopolitics as a way to procrastinate. So enjoy. And this evening, because I've already done a pretty messy reading of chapter 1, I'm going to go ahead and move on to chapter 2, Smart Power. And because these are some shorter chapters that are all collected together, I may go up to 5 or 6. I don't quite know. I just kind of want to chill and not think about the insane workload I'm currently avoiding. So enjoy. Grab your cup of tea, your blanket, your cozy cat. Mine, you just saw him run under the bed. And I'm still not in my normal setup. Still figuring that out. So tonight it's just chilling. Am I muted? Okay. I don't think I'm muted. I should be. Okay. Psychopolitics, Chapter 2, Smart Power. Power commands highly different modes of experience. Its most direct and immediate form finds expression as the negation of freedom. This enables power holders to impose their will against the will of those subject to power, by violence if need be. However, power is not limited to breaking down resistance and forcing obedience. It need not take the form of coercion. Power that relies on violence does not represent power of the highest order. The mere fact that another will manages to form and turn against the power holder attests to the latter's weakness. Wherever power does not come into view at all, it exists without question. The greater power it is, the more quietly it works. It just happens. It has no need to draw attention to itself. To be sure, power can express itself as violence or repression, but it is not based on force. Power need not exclude, prohibit, or censor. Not does it stand opposed to freedom. Interesting quirk of translation there. Indeed, power can even use freedom to its own ends. Only in its negative form does power manifest itself as a violence that says no by shattering the will and annulling freedom. Today, power is assuming increasingly permissive forms. In its permissivity, indeed, in its friendliness. Oh gosh, I just had a mental flashback to So non-Americans who are watching this, you may not be familiar with DARE, the DARE program, but it's essentially an anti-drugs program pushed in American public education, usually around I want to say ages 9 through 12. So end of elementary school, primary school, beginning of secondary. And I'm thinking of the cop dog and everything. Power is friendly. Power is the what is it? The bloodhound mascot who wants you to narc on all your friends. Fun fact: I failed DARE. I feel like that's why I'm now a fake Landian on the internet. Power is shedding its negativity and presenting itself as freedom. Disciplinary power is still commanded by negativity. Its mode of articulation is inhibitive, not permissive. Because it is negative, it does not describe the neoliberal regime which beams forth in positivity. Oh, very MLM moment right here. I wonder what the Arbonne CEO would say about this. The neoliberal regime's technology of power takes on the subtle, supple, and smart forms, thereby it escapes all visibility. Now the subjugated subject is not even aware of its own subjugation. The whole context of domination remains entirely hidden. Consequently, the subject thinks itself free. Inasmuch as it expends a great deal of energy to force people into the straitjacket of commandments and prohibitions, disciplinary power proves inefficient. A significantly more efficient technology of power makes sure that people subordinate themselves to power relations on their own. Okay, hitting pause on the reading for one moment. Okay, I'm really glad to hear that, punk poetry in the chat, because the first chapter I was super not writhing with this, but so far, yeah, you're right. This is a great, I suppose, reinterfacing of that, honestly, Foucault's classic to Spit and Punish. Ironically, that's like the one I am the least. I'm familiar with it, obviously. I've read DP, but it's the one I'm least conversant in. So this is a really interesting way to reintegrate with that end of Foucauldian thought when my experience is primarily with power, knowledge, and technologies of the South. So back to the reading. Thank you for your comment, punk poetry. That gives me a lot of hope. I was so mean to this author, to forgive me, byung-chul because of the Big Brother stuff. So that helps. Thank you. Such a dynamic seeks to activate, motivate, and optimize, not to inhibit or repress. It proves so effective because it does not operate by means of forbidding and depriving, but by pleasing and fulfilling. Instead of making people compliant, it seeks to make them dependent. Power that is smart and friendly does not operate frontally, i.e., against the will of those who are subject to it. Instead, it guides their will to its own benefit. It says yes more often than no. It operates seductively, not repressively. It seeks to call forth positive emotions and exploit them. It leads astray instead of erecting obstacles. Third wave feminism. Maybelline Marxism. Instead of standing opposed to the subject, smart and friendly power meets the subject halfway. Smart power cozies up to the psyche rather than disciplining it through coercion or prohibitions. Interesting. It does not impose silence. Rather, it is constantly calling on us to confide, share, and participate, to communicate our opinions, needs, wishes, and preferences, to tell all about our lives. Friendly power proves more powerful, as it were, than purely repressive power. Bookmarking something. It manages not to be seen at all. Today's crisis of freedom stems from the fact that the operative technology of power does not negate or repress freedom so much as exploit it. Free choice is eliminated to make way for a free selection from among the items on offer. Smart power with a liberal, friendly appearance, power that stimulates and seduces, is more compelling than power that imposes, threatens, and decrees. Its signal and seal is the like button. Oh no! Now people subjugate themselves to domination by consuming and communicating, and they click like all the while. Okay, so this is where it's happening again. I see his baseline, I see his horizon, but the way he's engaging with these particular facets of technology, specifically social media interfacing, is it's a bit boomer. So I'm going to swallow that and continue. Neoliberalism is the capitalism of like. It is fundamentally different from 19th century capitalism, which operated by means of disciplinary constraints and prohibitions. I wonder if he's going to elaborate on that more, because there's a lot to be said on that. Smart power reads and appraises our conscious and unconscious thoughts. It places its stock in voluntary self-organization and self-optimization. As such, it has no need to overcome resistance. Mastery of this sort requires no great expenditure of energy or violence. It simply happens. The capitalism of like should come with a warning label. Protect me from what I want. Good point. Good horizon. Interesting. A lot, very fruitful, but also okay. And that is the end of Smart Power, which is chapter 2 of Psychopolitics. Give me one moment. Keep messing with my hair. There we go. And I'm secretly a 12-year-old boy. The codex is drooling. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see what's going on. Chapter 3, Psychopolitics. The Mole and the Snake. Disciplinary society consists of settings and institutions of confinement. The family, schools, prisons, barracks, hospitals, and factories all represent disciplinary spaces that confine. Yeah, okay, absolutely, that's true. And that's a direct import from DMP and the history of sexuality, but also what immediately popped up is the everything is a prison meme. I apologize, I'm not laughing at this. The disciplinary subject changes from one milieu of confinement to the next. Milieu? That's one of those 101 words I don't know how to pronounce. I apologize. In doing so, it moves within a closed system. The inhabitants of spaces of confinement can be ordered in space and time. The animal of disciplinary society is the mole. In his postscript on the societies of control, Deleuze diagnoses a general crisis affecting all, keeps using this word, milieux, I apologize, of confinement. Their closedness and rigidity pose a problem. They are no longer suited to post-industrial, immaterial, and networked forms of production. The latter push for more openness by breaking borders down. But the mole cannot bear such openness. Accordingly, the snake takes the mole's place. The snake is the animal of a neoliberal control society to which disciplinary society has yielded. In contrast to the mole, the snake does not move in closed spaces. Rather, it makes space by means of its own movement. The mole is a laborer. In contrast, the snake is an entrepreneur. The snake is an animal of the neoliberal regime. The mole moves through unpredetermined... Hold on. I'm trying to sit in this chair normally, and it's just not happening. The mole moves through predetermined spaces. As such, it subordinates itself to spatial restrictions. The mole is a subjugated subject. But the snake is a project inasmuch as it creates space through the course it steers. The passage from the mole to the snake, from subject to project, does not amount to setting out for an entirely new way of life. Instead, it represents a mutation, indeed an intensification of capitalism, which remains one and the same. The mole's restricted movements impose limits on productivity. Even when it labors in disciplined fashion, it cannot exceed a certain level of productivity. The snake eliminates such limitations through new forms of movement. Accordingly, the capitalist system is switching from the mole model to the snake model in order to generate more productivity. According to Deleuze, the disciplinary regime organizes itself as the body. It is a biopolitical regime. The neoliberal regime, in contrast, seems like a soul. As such, psychopolitics is its form of government. It is constantly introducing an inexorable rivalry presented as healthy competition, a wonderful motivation. Motivation, projects, competition, optimization, and initiative represent features of the psychopolitical technology of domination that constitutes the neoliberal regime. Above all, the snake embodies the guilt and debts that the neoliberal regime employs as instruments of domination. Oh, this is so much better than chapter 1. My faith is restored. Oh, I'm so happy. Okay. Still not super on board with the metaphorical language he's using to discuss all of these things, but this is a much more apt turn to what I was hoping for psychopolitics. Chapter 4, Psychopolitics, Biopolitics. Since the 17th century, Foucault claims power has ceased to manifest itself as the godlike sovereign's capacity to deal death and instead taken the form of discipline. The power of sovereignty is the might of the sword. It threatens with death and exploits the privilege to seize hold of life in order to suppress it. In contrast, disciplinary power is not a power to deal death, but a power over life. Its function is no longer to kill, but to invest life through and through. Hereby, the old power of death yields to the careful administration of bodies and the calculated management of life. The transition from the power of sovereignty to disciplinary power followed from changes in forms of production, specifically the shift from agrarian to industrial production. As industrialization proceeded, it became necessary to discipline the body and fit it to a mechanic production. Instead of torturing the body, disciplinary power yokes it into a system of norms. Calculated coercion pervades each and every limb and comes to be inscribed even in the automatism of habits. The body is calibrated to be a production unit, a concerted orthopiety. That's not a word I'm familiar with. Fashions shapeless dough into a machine. Disciplines are methods which make possible the meticulous control of the operations of the body, which assure the constant subjection of its forces and impose upon them a relation of docility-utility. Disciplinary power is normative power. It subjects the subject to a set of rules, norms, commandments, and prohibitions, and eliminates deviations and anomalies. Such negativity of training and drills is constitutive of disciplinary power. On this point, it approaches the power of sovereignty, which has its basis in the negativity of levying and conscription. Both sovereign power and disciplinary power pursue allo-exploitation. They bring forth the obedient subject. Disciplinary technology also reaches beyond the physical realm into the mental sphere. After all, industry means hard work. Industrial school was another term for reform school. Bentham observed that his panopticon assures inmates moral improvement too. That said, disciplinary power does not focus on the psyche. The orthopedic technology of disciplinary power is too crude to penetrate into the deeper layers of the soul with its hidden wishes, needs, and desires, and take it over. Bentham's big brother only observes inmates from the outside. His panopticon is bound to the optical medium. It has no access to inner thoughts or needs. Disciplinary power discovered population as a productive and reproductive mass to be administrated carefully. Biopolitics is devoted to this task. Androphilia, I'm so glad to hear that. I deliberately don't keep a persistent streaming schedule, because if I set myself a deadline or a schedule, I tend to not do it. So I'm glad I'm a bit spotty dotty, so I'm glad you could join me this evening. Reproductive cycles, birth and death rates, levels of general health, and life expectancy provide the objects of regulation. Foucault explicitly discusses the biopolitics of the population. Biopolitics is the Biopolitics is the governmental technology of disciplinary power. However, this approach proves altogether unsuited to the neoliberal regime, which exploits the psyche above all. Biopolitics, which makes use of population statistics, has no access to the psychic realm. It can deliver no material for drawing up a psychogram of the population. Demography is not the same thing as psychography. It cannot tap into or disclose the psyche. On this score, statistics and big data lie worlds apart. Big data provides the means for establishing not just an individual, but a collective psychogram, perhaps even the psychogram of the unconscious self. As such, it may yet shine a light into the depths of the psyche and exploit the unconscious entirely. And that was chapter 4 of Psychopolitics, which is summary and encounter of biopolitics. And let's see, I see things in the chat. Oh, that one weird art channel. Do you mean in terms of just like the technology-oriented studies of my own research and that sort of thing? I'm fully aware of the irony of it. And in that way, it's just, I also am wondering, do you mean what I'm becoming in terms of what I present on the channel? Or just in terms of what I'm reading in my critiques of it? And I know you're not trying to insult. I suppose in terms of the persona I present, I find it, I can see the irony there, but I suppose this is one of the reasons I approach it from religion's perspective, is that the only way out is through. You have to throw yourself into the deep end in a way of an ideology and drown in it. And I don't think that's the case, though. I don't know. I think maybe that's one of the things that's actually a bit of an interesting issue in terms of just being a streamer in this way, and having that separation, because I do feel, in a way, what I critique in terms of social media and the capitalism of attention, even, is something I do myself critique in my encounter of technoculture. But I don't know. I don't think, because the criticisms that Foucault and Han and some other scholars are making are ones I make too. I don't know. I also they do lay worlds apart. I agree. It's also just something where I just like thinking about ideologies in a speculative way. I said this in my last stream, but I have gotten really comfortable saying I don't know, or I don't subscribe to this newsletter, in a way that doesn't mean I disagree with it. I just play tourist to the episteme. Yeah, exactly. I suppose this is something that I like I just said, like I don't subscribe to the newsletter in a way of queer theory. However, there is something to be said for the engagement of performativity and trying something on for size. A friend of mine who is like a very wonderful person, has this term in his studies of philosophy, in his work with metaphysics, that is literally just trying a framework on for size. And that's kind of what I try to do. So there is something heavily ironic, I think, just the fact that I'm streaming these readings and oh yeah, okay, no, I see the irony. I see what you're touching on now. But how do I stop fascists other than deep psychological understanding? Oh boy. Well, I think that's okay. I have a big rant on the idea of punch a Nazi, as it specifically comes from Goyam. But obviously the Leviathan state. On occasion, that's a joke, but that's a good question. That's kind of one that like my last really major project that I'm still wrapping up an ode to my advisor, which I hope he doesn't. He knows this channel exists, but I don't think he listens to it. My last really big project, Marked Analogies, was essentially like a techno-cultural, implicitly religious account of meme Nazis on the internet, on like 9chan and that kind of thing. And part of something I really had to do like a lot of mental processing on with digital patchwork ethnography was how much of yourself do you surrender to understand? Like I read a book by a Jewish sociologist who was going to dinners and driving KKK members to their oncology appointments, and I'm like, that's beyond the scholarly pale, even if I understand why. And in a way, I have that same impulse of, I call it the train wreck impulse. I just can't look away. So it's one of the reasons I read Land on this channel. It's a productive exercise in my exterminative instinct as a human being, you know? But I wrap all that up and I say all that to say, I understand what you mean by the irony now. In terms of this being ultimately a social media platform and me streaming and me engaging with you in this many layered way that's distanced and disembodied. But in that, and as who I am, I don't know that person. And who I'm always becoming, I don't think it's completely a contradiction, you know? It's a play. The world's a stage. Yay. And that is all a very long way to say, I don't know. Okay, let's get to chapter 5. God, this is so readable. I love it. So with psychopolitics, we're now moving on to chapter 5, Foucault's dilemma. After Discipline and Punish, Foucault recognized that disciplinary society did not reflect the times in every respect. In the late 1970s, he devoted his attention to neoliberal forms of government. However, the problem with his analyses is that he stuck to the concepts of population and biopolitics. And this is, I'll quote, "It seems to me that only when we know what this governmental regime called liberalism was, we will be able to grasp what biopolitics is." Back to Han. Yet, in the course of this same series of lectures, he mentions neither biopolitics nor population again. He could just be himself. Foucault just could be himself. That's one of the things I do appreciate about, like, way at the beginning of Society Must Be Defended. He has, like, the first lectures about this esoteric kinship of a Freemason-esque fetishism for archival, like the archive, the projects of knowledge. And in that, building these expansive mental mind castles of knowledge where you almost expect everything to be self-referential. So in a way, that could just be that. But, sorry, I gave myself a bit of an impulsive haircut earlier, so I have like this one long fringe. Oh boy. Pandemic. At this juncture, Foucault evidently did not appreciate that biopolitics and population, which represent genuine categories of disciplinary society, are unsuited to describing the neoliberal regime. Consequently, he failed to do what the circumstances actually called for, to make the turn to psychopolitics. The 1978 through 1979 lectures do not undertake the analysis of neoliberal biopolitics. Even though he did not recognize the real problem, Foucault offered self-critical remarks. I would like to assure you that, in spite of everything, I really did intend to talk about biopolitics. And then, things being what they are, I have ended up talking about length, maybe for too long, about neoliberalism. That's a mood. In the introduction to Homo Sacer, and I definitely just mispronounced that, Giorgio Agamben speculates that Foucault's death kept him from showing how he would have developed the concept and study of biopolitics. But counter to such guesswork, if Foucault's early death kept him from anything, it deprived him of the chance to reevaluate his idea of biopolitics and abandon it in order to investigate neoliberal psychopolitics. Agamben's analysis of domination also fails to approach the technologies of power in the neoliberal regime in meaningful fashion. I am so sorry. The homines sacri of today have not been shut out of the system. They have been shut into the system. Foucault explicitly ties biopolitics to capitalism's disciplinary form, which socializes the body in its productive capacity. For capitalist society, it is biopolitics, the biological, the somatic, the corporal, that matters more than anything else, in his words. In other words, biopolitics fundamentally concerns the biological and the physical. All in all, it constitutes a politics of the body in the fullest sense. But neoliberalism, a further development, indeed a mutated form of capitalism, is not primarily concerned with the biological, the somatic, the corporal. It has discovered the psyche as a productive force. This psychic turn, that is, the turn to psychopolitics, also connects with a mode of operation of contemporary capitalism. Now, immaterial and non-physical forms of production are what determine the course of capitalism. What gets produced are not material objects, but immaterial ones. For instance, information and programs. The body no longer represents a central force of production as it formerly did in a biopolitical disciplinary society. Now, productivity is not to be enhanced by overcoming physical resistance so much as by optimizing psychic or mental processes. Physical discipline has given way to mental optimization. I'm feeling so called out right now, and my foot just fell asleep. Yeah, okay. And neuroenhancement differs from the disciplinary techniques of psychiatry fundamentally. Today, the body is being released from the immediate process of production and turning into the object of optimization, whether along aesthetic lines or in terms of health technology. Accordingly, orthopedic intervention is yielding to aesthetic intervention. Foucault's docile body has no place in this production process. Cosmetic surgery and fitness studios are taking place of disciplinary orthopedics. It's almost as if these things could be working in tandem. That said, physical optimization means more than aesthetic practice alone. Sexiness and fitness represent new economic resources to be increased, marketed, and exploited. Ow. There we go. Bernard Stiegler has rightly observed that Foucault's concept of biopower is not suited to the time. That is a very, very good point. Yes, that would be very interesting. No, especially in the current context with the actual, like, the people that we're seeing both in the establishment and specifically the medicalized establishment, who are engaging in, even if not directly condoning, giving room and space to these types of theories. Ow. Okay. My foot definitely fell asleep. I'm sorry. Okay. Foucault's biopower, which he himself describes and so powerfully, historically and geographically, by localizing it in Europe, is no longer the force behind our age. According to Stiegler, biopower has been replaced by psychotechnological psychopower. Above all, he has in mind the programming industry, which is telecratic. By reducing us to impulsive creatures of consumption, it induces mass regression. Such psychotechnics contrast with the technology of writing and reading. For Stiegler, the medium of literacy means enlightenment. Accordingly, he invokes Kant. Kant's thought of maturity as humanity's sovereignty is based on the apparatus of reading and writing. However, Stiegler's overemphasis on television is problematic. For him, it represents the psychotechnical apparatus tout court. Now, at the beginning of the 21st century, cell phones and many other devices catalyze synaptic circuitry, yet it is principally television that governs the influx of information. No, sir. I wouldn't. Yeah. In terms of apparatus, yeah. Okay. I'm going to think about that more. It's time for some Hitler, guys. I really ought to read some Friedrich Hitler on here at some point. Okay, bookmarking that. In fact, the opposition between literacy and television affords a superannuated scheme of cultural critique which fails to do justice to the digital revolution. Strangely, Stiegler hardly examines truly digital technology such as the internet and social media. No, I don't. No feet. It's not. No feet. No feet. Strangely, Stiegler hardly examines truly digital technology, such as the internet and social media, which prove fundamentally different from the mass media of the past. What is more, he barely pays attention to the panoptic structure of digital networks. As a result, he completely misses the workings of neoliberal psychopolitics, which employs digital technology on a massive scale. In the early 1980s, Foucault turned to the technologies of the self. Oh, yes, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Just gonna have a moment of silence for that. Thank you. In the early 1980s, Foucault turned to technologies of the self. Back to the reading. Also, yes, technologies of the self. I'm in my element now. The term refers to intentional and voluntary actions by which men not only set themselves rules of conduct, but seek to transform themselves, to change themselves into their singular being, and to make their life into an oeuvre. I'm so sorry. I apologize deeply. I know I should know how to pronounce this word at this point. That carries certain aesthetic values and meets certain stylistic criteria. I don't think I like where he's going with this. Foucault developed a historically situated ethics of the self, and he did so in a context largely detached from technologies and techniques of power and domination. Ouvre, ouvre. Oh, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Consequently, it is often assumed that his ethics of the self stands in opposition to power and domination. Indeed, Foucault himself pointed out the shift he was making from technologies of power to technologies of the self. And this is actually where I always kind of diverged from Foucault. I did feel it was like a situationally incomplete. Perhaps I've insisted too much on the technology of domination and power. I am more and more interested in the interaction between oneself and others in the technologies of the individual domination, in the history of how an individual acts upon himself, in the technology of the self. In fact, the blind spot in Foucault's analysis is the technology of power and the neoliberal regime. Okay. Wow, there could be a convergence here. Foucault did not see that the neoliberal regime utterly claims the technology of the self for its own purposes. Perpetual self-optimization as the exemplary neoliberal technology of the self represents nothing so much as a highly efficient mode of domination and exploitation. As an entrepreneur of himself, as an entrepreneur of himself, the neoliberal achievement subject engages in auto-exploitation willingly and even passionately. The self as a work of art amounts to a beautiful but deceptive illusion that the neoliberal regime maintains in order to exhaust its resources entirely. Under neoliberalism, the technology of power takes on a subtle form, does not lay hold of individuals directly. Instead, it ensures that individuals act on themselves so that power relations are interiorized and then interpreted as freedom. Oh, that's a very good observation. Making a mental bookmark there. Self-optimization and submission, yep. Freedom and exploitation fall into one. Such engineering of freedom and exploitation, which occurs in order to effect self-exploitation, is what escaped Foucault. Okay, I think that's actually a good place to. This is some good stuff to chew on for myself, actually. And that was chapter 5 of Psychopolitics. And yeah, okay. I think I see his wider project and where he's going with that. Still have certain reservations, but in this, I think I'm highlighting, like mentally, I'm coming to the conclusion that so much of the disconnect with me as a reader is one, okay, I will never get away from the bad metaphors and the capital of like, but also probably weird quirks of translation. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for me this evening. Okay, well, you should stay tuned. And because I don't do a set reading and streaming schedule, you're going to be better off like having notifications turned on, I suppose, to get alerts when I do stream. I'm not quite sure how that works exactly because I tend to just do these very impulsively. I don't like making announcements because then that builds up expectations. I like giving myself absolutely minimal expectations. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Okay. Well, in that case, I look forward to reading slash metaphorically hearing your input on future chapters. Yeah, I'm really interested. Oh, gamification. Oh dear. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, I flipped and I'm skimming now and I'm like, okay, this is actually going to get really interesting. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me and this very impulsive, pretty brief stream. Let me think. I don't want to do a sign off tonight. This is just I'm not feeling the Doomer GF sign off this evening. I'm sorry. Please don't ask to see my feet. Yeah. Anytime anyone makes a joke about my feet, I'm not going to do the sign off. Please don't do that. All right. Anyway, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And thank you for joining me.